Here's a peek at what guests had to say after the show.
All right, we're back with the younger, more casual Patrick Cannon. I feel like throwing a football on the lawn at Hyannisport with you. Okay, here's a great softball for you, John. Why do you contend that the 2012 election was the most consequential in recent history?
Because the Republicans were rolling back the American social contract. Even Paul Ryan said that he wanted to rewrite that, which would have meant returning us, or at least trying to return us, to a pre-New Deal era. They don't believe in this stuff. Paul Ryan is an Ayn Rand guy.
Right.
And that philosophy would have gone to the center of our politics. We would have been moved very, very sharply to the right. And worse, here's the worst part. The economy's headed up a little bit right now. If Romney had won, it would have seemed that slashing taxes for the wealthy, slashing regulations, slashing programs for the poor had a cause and effect on an improving economy. And progressive policies would have been discredited for a generation.
How is he a progressive? What has he done since he was inaugurated that shows he's a progressive?
You just were talking about Obamacare. Progressives tried for 100 years, since the Progressive Party platform of 1912 with Theodore Roosevelt, to get universal coverage. Several presidents tried. They all failed until Barack Obama.
Clinton. But the progressives wanted the public option, and he didn't do that.
Well, that's making the perfect the enemy of the good. He didn't get everything he wanted. Roosevelt didn't get everything he wanted on Social Security.
But he should have. But he should have went for the public option.
No,
that's the middle.
That's
the middle.
Look, I was all for the public option. I'm a single payer guy.
The public was for it until they didn't back it.
No, the politics. Politics is what you can get through, and eight presidents had failed to do this. He got it done. So it's pretty crazy to second-guess his strategy.
I'm not, and I give him all the credit in the world. But let's get clear on where the goalposts are. The left-wing approach would be single-payer, like what all the other modern countries have.
That's what I want.
The right-wing approach would just keep going along the way we're doing.
Yeah.
45,000 people dying every year because they don't have it. The middle approach should have been the public option. It's not that radical. The 70% of people were for it until the Republicans. I always say the Republicans don't run away from polls; they change them. The Democrats run away from them.
Here's the problem. In 2009, when this was being debated, 2009 and 2010. They were trying to get this bill through the crazy Senate Finance Committee.
Yes,
and the way they
I remember
the
that
politics
gang of
was that if they did the public option thing, it wouldn't have gone through.
I wish there was a gang
so
in the Senate.
They did an awful lot of good.
Those motherfuckers up. That'd be great if they should just show the gun in the shirt, under the shirt, like that.
Not allowed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other progressive legislation too, especially in the first 2 years that got done.
All right, let me ask a question for Neil. If our economy is really back. Neil, if our economy is really black, why aren't companies hiring? And when they do, why are wages still so low?
If you're an employer, especially if you're a small, medium-sized business, the incentive to hire is not particularly great, partly because of the regulations. If you look at small businesses, the burden of regulation is relatively much higher on them than it is on large businesses. And although you can see the economy recovering, there's great uncertainty about future regulation. A lot of small businesses don't really know what Obamacare is going to mean for them. And there's a lot of uncertainty also about the future path of taxation. So even firms that could expand, that have the cash to hire, are not doing it. And if you look at the survey data, it's clear that it's not because there wasn't enough stimulus, and it's certainly not because interest rates aren't low enough because they couldn't be lower. It's because there's a sense that the future is uncertain, and they really don't know whether the policy environment is going to encourage
But interest rates are going up a little now, aren't they?
Well, that possibility, what's interesting
could only
is that,
go up.
Well, even that possibility, which is not certain at all, but even the discussion of that possibility caused the markets to go into a frenzy. And by the way, when you talk about the progressive aspects of the Obama presidency, his biggest economic success has been to bring the stock market back to where it was before the crisis. Who benefits from that? The 1%, not the 80%.
Right.
who hardly own any stocks at all.
You back Romney, and hasn't that austerity policy in Europe and here basically failed? Can we agree on that?
Well, one of the interesting things about this debate is that it's become so simplified into a caricature austerity and a caricature stimulus, as if there were options to do more than a 10% deficit, a 10% of GDP deficit. The stimulus was pretty big. For 3 years, the deficit was around about 9 or 10%. And the austerity, which was being discussed, I don't think I remember anybody saying we should be balancing the budget in 2009. So we should get away from the kind of caricatures.
The Tea Party freshmen were saying that in 2011 they wanted to
nobody's serious.
$1 trillion in 1 year.
Nobody's serious.
But I think if we can talk in broad strokes, I think England, I know, and I am sure other European countries did go for austerity.
But they didn't have a choice, Bill. I mean, honestly, the debt burden was so much higher. You know, the public plus private debt for the UK is like 500% of GDP.
Okay, that may be true.
So there wasn't a choice. The idea that Britain could have done Keynesian stimulus, which is kind of Paul Krugman's fantasy, isn't credible. It wasn't an option. Even if the Labour Party had somehow won in 2010, they wouldn't have been able to do it. The Southern Europeans didn't have that option. The markets essentially said, we're not lending you any more money. You guys are bust. So we have to be realistic about what the alternatives were. And they were very, very limited, especially within the Eurozone, where monetary policy was made by the Germans.
All right. Question for Patrick. Do you see mental illness as a significant factor in gun violence?
We need a rule governing mental health to be fully covered, because what's going to happen is if it's excluded like it has in the past, people like these folks who we find out more about in Santa Monica or Jared Loughner or everywhere else, they are people who are not getting mental health care. So if we want to do something to really try to make a difference in minimizing these tragedies, let's not turn our backs on people who have a mental illness. And that's exactly how we deal with this issue today. And what's sanctioned is that now insurance companies, because they know no one cares about people with mental illness, can literally discriminate and get away with it, because no one's saying, oh, you should have covered that person, because no one wants to treat these illnesses the same as every other physical illness.
Remember how Eisenhower got... Remember reading about how Eisenhower got education money through as defense, you know, at the height of the Cold War? Couldn't you get more mental health funding through as part of a gun package, a gun safety
Well, you
package?
hit the nail on the head, Jonathan, but I think it's veterans who are going to be...
We haven't been able to pass any...
they're going to try again. They're going to come back.
Here's where I think the
to me,
real
that would be the
opportunity
last
is.
place it would go through.
No, because you sweeten it, because a lot of the Republicans who were against background checks and that kind of thing, after Newtown, they said, but we're all for doing something about mental health in that 2-second period.
So I think the veterans, Jonathan,
they said that
are the
because
key,
that's what happened in Newtown.
the veterans bring Republicans and Democrats together. And veterans have this, quote, signature wound of the war, which is both traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress. I think the way to approach mental health is get something that everyone can sign on. And the way we're treating our veterans is deplorable.
Yes.
Deplorable.
I mean, it's such a knotty issue, because how do you commit somebody? We're all a little crazy. But like when I see that mugshot of the Newtown killer, that look, I mean, I know this is wrong, but I think put that guy away, just on the picture.
So except that, Bill, it could be...
The Joker costume, the guy in Arizona, and and
the
Colorado.
problem is we knew
so many of them
these people had problems well before they got their snapshot and their picture. And if it were cancer or anything else, you treat them on first indication. Like you can tell I get skin cancer. So I go to the doctor and get skin cancer checkups. You these days probably are worthy of a prostate check, because you're at that age where...
Whoa.
But not here, not now.
That's what I get for defending pot, huh? All right, thank you very much. We gotta go.
Real Time with Bill Maher, Friday night at 10. Ask Bill and his guests your questions right after the show at HBO.com.